Imagine standing at your own funeral while still breathing. A priest reads the burial rites. 3 shovels of earth thud onto your head. Then he hands you a shroud and a clapper bell, the sound you must use to warn the living that the dead are coming. This wasn't a metaphor. In parts of medieval Europe, suspected lepers were declared dead to the world and exiled to the town's edge, to leprosaria called lazar houses. Real rites, real bells, real banishment. And yet, here's the twist. This cruelty wore a halo called charity. Tonight, we dig up that grave and see what mercy really meant. You think a diagnosis is paperwork? In some parishes, it was a burial. The ritual, separatio leprosorum, walked a person to an open grave, sprinkled earth, pronounced them dead to the world, alive to God, and sent them away with a sackcloth habit, a wooden clapper, and orders to keep their distance. Their legal life often ended too, inheritance rights void, names erased from civic ledgers. It was theater with teeth. Public fear became liturgy. Urban rumor became law. And with a bell's rattle, a human being was transformed into a walking warning sign. The next act takes place outside the walls. Medieval Europe learned to hide what it feared. Leper houses were planted beyond gates, by crossroads and streams, far enough to comfort townsfolk, close enough to draw alms. England alone had hundreds by the 13th century. Archaeology and charters speak of chapels, dormitories, drains, even sloped chapel floors to sluice after Mass. A geography of exclusion grew with pious plaques over the doors. Charity built the buildings. Segregation chose the addresses. Modern zoning laws? Think of these as the dark prototype. Healthcare and quarantine fused to a border policy. Next, what happened when you crossed that threshold and heard the chapel bell? Imagine waking to matins in a chapel that is yours and not yours. You attend Mass from a side door or a screened window. Your clothes mark you: long hood, heavy cloak, humble shoes. Statutes demanded the habit at all times. You went nowhere without it. Food was plain, work was real, gardens to tend, alms to collect with your box, prayers to offer for patron souls. It wasn't a prison exactly, more like a monastery for the unwanted, with rules on movement and conduct that kept comfort tethered to obedience. Even your furnishings could be counted on one hand. The next rule touches bodies. Now we hit the nerve: marriage, sex, and contagion. Popular belief screamed, "Don't touch." But canon law? It cut the other way. Pope Alexander III's decretals said a healthy spouse could not abandon a leprous spouse. Conjugal rights, the debt, still bound them. Some jurists allowed separate beds or houses, but insisted the debt remained owed, even enforceable by church sanction. Imagine the horror, the tenderness, the bargaining, the fear. Love grappling with a disease people thought rotted both face and soul. Mercy here was a command, not a feeling. Next, we meet the neighbors who wanted the lepers farther still. You're told to carry a clapper, to rattle it before you turn down a lane, to signal your distance when asking for bread. Not for nothing did the leper become a sound before a person. Statutes and exempla demanded distinctive clothing and no public wandering without it. The clapper or bell became a portable quarantine. The irony? The bell also marked you as entitled to alms. That same sound could open purses, fear and charity ringing at the same pitch. You were a sinner to some, a shortcut to heaven to others. And then, one summer, the noise turned into a scream. France, 1321. New panic, wells poisoned by lepers. Confessions wrung under torture claimed powders and plots. Soon Jews and Muslims were folded into the fantasy. Municipalities made it judicial with arrests and fires. The leper, already dead to the world, was now enemy of the world. Some were burned. The crusade of fear metastasized across borders in weeks. This wasn't medicine. It was scapegoating as public policy. And it left a long stain. The idea of the contaminated outsider didn't die with the rumors. It learned to adapt. Next time you hear "protect the water," listen for the old clapper. Here's the twist you didn't expect. Lepers were spiritual gold. Christ's special sufferers, some called them. Give alms, and you banked merit. Found a leper hospital, and you bought prayers for your soul forever. The Order of St. Lazarus began as a leper hospice. Knights and brothers cared for, and sometimes included, lepers, blending warfare, nursing, and sanctity into one green cross habit. Beneath the sermon, though, stood a ledger. Endowments, rents, bread allowances, rights to pigs with bells in certain towns. Compassion brought food. Segregation set the table. Next, we step back into the chapel and watch a body become a boundary. Walk the site. A lane broken away from town. A low chapel, sometimes detached, sometimes with squints or shutters. Dormers for air. Drains for washing. A boundary ditch to remind visitors when to stop. Excavations show the plan. Chapel-centered, infirmary ranges, garden plots. It looks like care. It is care. But the angles are defensive, designing sightlines so the healthy can see devotion without sharing breath. Floors sloped to flush. In sacred space, you are a geometry problem. How close is too close to be holy? Next, we visit the gatehouse, where rules hang like icons. Read the statutes, wear the habit, keep the peace. Don't leave without license. Beg with humility. Accept your rations. Attend Mass. Do not handle market goods with bare hands. Use your stick, your bowl, your proxy. The statutes of houses like St. Julian's even specified garments by the L. Hoods 3, cloaks 2 1/4. Humility stitched to your skin. Rights existed too. To alms, to lodging, to prayers. But the sharpest line was movement. Your world shrank to chapel, yard, and road to the alms stone. Mercy fed you. Mercy fenced you in. Next, we watch law declare you alive again, on paper. The separatio rite said it plainly. Dead to the world, living again to God. Communities were told not to harm the leper and to provide liberally for their needs. Alms sermonized into law. Some places even relaxed exile for a few days at Easter. But that kindness came with conditions. Wear the habit, ring the bell, keep apart. Legal silences also did damage. To be dead in civic eyes meant wills, inheritances, lawsuits, life were hard or impossible. Charity spared your body while law erased your person. So where did a leper actually belong? Family, church, or nowhere? The answer split even canonists return to marriage. Canonists debated the conjugal debt with chilling precision. Some said the healthy spouse must render it. Others allowed separation of beds if horror overwhelmed the will, yet still obliged the debt in principle. Think about the awkward choreography that followed. Priests counseling patients, spouses negotiating privacy, fear of contagion versus fear of sin. Mercy looked like duty. Love looked like obedience. This is where our modern instincts choke, because we expect empathy to feel gentle. In the 12th and 13th centuries, mercy could be a command that hurt. Next, we ask, who paid for all this hurting? Hospitals needed money. Endowments, rents, mills, fields. Pious donors fed the accounts as well as the poor. In return, they expected prayers for the dead, candles on anniversaries, and reputations burnished by visible almsgiving. Towns liked the arrangement. The dangerous were housed, the devout felt virtuous, and the boundary of us and them stayed thick. The residents performed the script, rattled the clapper, kept the rule. It's the oldest bargain in welfare history. We'll help you, if you stay in your place. But what if the diagnosis was wrong, as archaeology now hints was sometimes the case? Then the play becomes tragedy. Picture a woman who never touched the market apples again with bare fingers. A man who learned to sleep to the rhythm of his own bell. A couple who negotiated kisses with a priest's rulings. A community that could recite Leviticus but feared its own reflection in an ulcer. Not every region held mock funerals. Not every town burned lepers. Some let them worship alongside neighbors. Some records show tolerance, even tenderness. But the larger story remains brutal. Fear of contagion reshaped law, maps, and meanings of mercy. And still the bell rings in the archives. One more sound remains. We began with a grave and a bell. A living person, buried by words, marked by cloth, and shipped to the edge of town. That image wasn't medieval melodrama. It was policy, ritualized as liturgy. The separatio leprosorum called a leper, dead to the world, alive to God, then ordered the community to feed, clothe, and avoid them. Mercy as segregation, compassion with a radius. It solved fear by drawing a line and writing a prayer over it. We walked the leprosaria, England's hundreds of lazar houses stretching along roads and riverbanks, built on alms and anxiety. Archaeology found chapels, drains, sloped floors, and gardens, the architecture of care calibrated to distance. Modern planners talk of buffer zones. Medieval builders made one out of incense and fear. In these places, daily life was steady and small. Bread, broth, beads, a hood always on, a stick between your hand and the market stall, a clapper in your palm when you crossed a path. The habit kept you decent. The habit kept others calm. Law wrapped itself around bodies and beds. Canon law, so often painted as pitiless, did something shocking. It insisted that a healthy spouse couldn't simply discard a leprous one. Alexander III's decretals defended conjugal rights and duties even when the face of the other frightened you. Jurists allowed separate lodgings, even separate beds, but they guarded the marriage as a sacred bond. From our vantage point, that feels cruel. Yet inside their world, it was the nearest thing to protection some leprous spouses could claim, a command to stay when flight felt justified. Mercy, again, as obligation that pinched. And then came the panic. In 1321, rumor turned to prosecution. Lepers accused of poisoning wells, confessions extracted, pyres lit, Jews and Muslims dragged into the story to fit the era's favorite enemies. It's the pattern you already know from other centuries. Disease plus fear equals scapegoat. The bell that once won alms became an alarm. Public health morphed into public theater, and people burned for it. If you're hearing echoes, you should. Every time a crisis needs a villain with a face we already distrust, the script pulls itself from storage. So what is the moral of this dark procession? First, Fear writes maps. The leper house on the edge of town shows how terror carves borders and then convinces us those borders are natural. Today we say hot zone, containment, red line. Yesterday they said Lazar house. The language changes. The geometry doesn't. Second, charity is never neutral. Medieval mercy fed, clothed, housed, and fenced. Donors gained prayers for their souls and order for their streets. Residents gained safety with strings attached. The deal, help in exchange for invisibility, still tempts modern systems that care best when the cared for stay out of sight. Third, law can comfort and crush at once. A right that called you dead to the world also commanded alms for your living body. Canonists who preserved a marriage may have protected some leprous spouses from abandonment. They also enforced conjugal duties through revulsion. Law is a mirror. What you fear, it reflects. What you value, it binds. Finally, the bell teaches a brutal lesson about the meaning of mercy. True mercy draws near. Medieval mercy often drew lines, yet within those lines lived real tenderness. Nurses washing sores, brothers planting gardens, patrons endowing loaves, a knightly order founded to care for the Christ sufferers. The same society that staged funerals for the living also built homes where those same living could pray, eat, and sleep without stones hitting their backs. It's an impossible knot. Faith and fear, generosity and exclusion, tied so tight you can still feel it under your fingers. So if you ever hear a faint clatter in an archive or a museum aisle, imagine this: a man or woman lifting a stick, setting down a bowl, and warning the world with a wooden rattle that they are approaching. Not a monster, not a rumor, a person. Dead to the world, they were told. Loudly alive, they answered, one bell stroke at a time. If this shook you, tell me what image hit hardest, the grave, the gate, or the bell. Comment your shock below and subscribe for more untold horrors of history. Like this, if you're grateful your town no longer buries the living. Next time, the holy punishments that made public squares smell like cooked flesh.